In 1925, Ernest Hemingway completed his first novel. It was a parody of the novel of Sherwood Anderson called Dark Laughter, and that book would end his friendship with Sherwood Anderson. Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to my series of videos about books that ended friendships. This time I'm going to be talking about Ernest Hemingway and what he did to end his friendship with mentor and writer Sherwood Anderson. So if you don't know, Sherwood Anderson was a part of kind of a small but really important for the time period literary artistic movement called the Chicago Renaissance or something like that, in which he and other writers and artists and poets begin to kind of express kind of really modernist ideas through their work. Most symbolic of that is probably Sherwood Anderson's series of interconnected short stories called Winesburg, Ohio, which is really the book that he's most famous for, which I believe was published in 1919 or 1920. And that series of stories really shows the desperation, the venality, the kind of awfulness of small town rural life in the United States of America, and as such, you know, it's considered to be kind of a really early modernist classic. Well, that book, you know, really made Sherwood Anderson kind of a literary star for a brief period of time, and he was by far the most important writer, I think, being published by a publishing company called Bonney and Liverwright, and so that's who Sherwood Anderson worked for. 1919, 1920, Ernest Hemingway comes home from his service in the Italian ambulance corps. He comes home from war, he's wounded, he's looking for something to do, he finds his way into journalism, and he contacts Sherwood Anderson, writes him a letter, gets an introduction, and he kind of briefly becomes friends with Sherwood Anderson, and kind of lets, you know, Anderson know that he's a writer and working on all these kinds of things, you know, and Anderson has some influence over Hemingway's style and over a lot of decisions Hemingway made. Probably most importantly, the decision or the influence that Anderson had over Hemingway was in convincing him to go to Paris. It was Anderson who more or less said to Hemingway, you have to go to Paris, you have to be part of the expatriate community, you have to be a part of what's going on in that city. And so Hemingway went, but he didn't go empty-handed. Anderson sent him with letters of introduction to writers and artists, and chief among them was a good friend of Sherwood Anderson, and that was Gertrude Stein. So it's because of Anderson that Hemingway finds his way into Gertrude Stein's salon, and it's because of Anderson then, in a sense, that Hemingway finds his way to Sylvia Beach and Shakespeare and Company bookstore, and a meeting with James Joyce, and the publication of, I think, 3 stories and 10 poems by kind of a small independent modernist press. And more importantly, it's through Anderson's influence with Bonney and Liverwright that Hemingway's first book of stories, called In Our Time, is published. Hemingway acknowledged this debt to Anderson in 1925 when the book was published, and, you know, saying it was only really through Anderson that his short stories found an American publisher. And so in lots of ways, the Ernest Hemingway who will go on to be the, you know, kind of mythic, notorious, infamous figure in American literature really comes to us via Sherwood Anderson. But while Hemingway was in Paris, he met lots of other writers, and among those writers was F. Scott Fitzgerald. And F. Scott Fitzgerald loved playing talent scout for Scribners. You saw my video about Fitzgerald and Thomas Boyd and the end of their friendship. You know that Fitzgerald liked to play talent scout for Scribner. That was his publisher. And for his editor, Max Perkins. And when Hemingway and Fitzgerald became friends, Fitzgerald kind of decided that Hemingway should be with Scribners and not with Bonney and Liverwright. And, you know, Hemingway being easy to find reasons to resent things and being, you know, fairly sensitive about how he was being treated, came to believe that Bonney and Liverwright was not the right publisher for him. The problem was that Bonney and Liverwright had the right of first refusal to his next book. That was part of the contract he signed when they published In Our Time. So whatever Hemingway produced next, they would have the right to. Well, Hemingway and Fitzgerald cook up this scheme to get him away from Bonney and Liverwright by writing this parody of Sherwood Anderson's book, Dark Laughter. Since Anderson was kind of the star at Bonney and Liverwright, they figured if they wrote this really obvious, broad parody of the work of Sherwood Anderson, then Bonney and Liverwright would have to reject it, because they couldn't possibly publish a book where one of their young writers made fun of one of their more established and more important writers. So Hemingway and Fitzgerald cook up the scheme. Fitzgerald helps Hemingway to write the novel. They submit Torrents of Spring to Bonnie and Liverwright, and of course Bonnie and Liverwright does exactly what Fitzgerald and Hemingway thought, and they rejected it, which meant that now Hemingway was free to seek another publisher, which is exactly what he and Fitzgerald want. So Fitzgerald introduces Hemingway's work to Max Perkins at Scribner's. Max Perkins agrees to publish Torrents of Spring, which he kind of had to do. Otherwise, I believe Bonnie and Liverwright would have had the right to Hemingway's next work. He agrees to publish Torrents of Spring so that he can also be the editor, and that Scribner's can also be the publisher of The Sun Also Rises, which is actually published a little bit before Torrents of Spring. It comes out before that, and that's the book then that launches, Hemingway as, the voice of the lost generation in many ways, and kind of creates that mystique around Hemingway and the Paris expatriate community. And, all it cost Hemingway was the friendship of a mentor and the person who helped him get published in the first place, Sherwood Anderson. There's no doubt that this left bitterness in the mind of Sherwood Anderson as late as 1935. He was still writing letters to his friends in which he expressed his dismay at Hemingway's choice of topics and made fun of the idea, which Hemingway had come out, I think, in a magazine article saying that all he wanted to do was write one perfect sentence. Anderson mocked that and said it was, really kind of disgusting, kind of a disgusting idea or a ridiculous idea. In addition to ending his friendship with Sherwood Anderson by writing Towards the Spring, that also ended his friendship with Gertrude Stein, who had also helped him a great deal by reading over The Sun Also Rises and his other work and encouraging him. So he kind of lost two literary friends, mentors, with one book. That would not be the last friendship with a writer that Hemingway ruined. I have a video about him ruining his friendship with Dos Passos. Obviously, if you've read A Movable Feast, you pick up on the fact that Hemingway used that to kind of try to trash Fitzgerald's reputation. He wasn't always kind to Fitzgerald or Zelda. That's kind of who Ernest Hemingway was. Anyway, I look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.